two things. A lot is said about gas being a transition fuel, or being clean fuel, but we do know that natural gas or fossil gas produces much methane, which is much more dangerous than carbon dioxide, even it doesn't last for a longer period as long in the atmosphere. So clearly, gas is not a clean energy source. It may be what is available in Nigeria, but to say that this is a clean uh, bridge is just announcing that we're going to use what we have. Now, I'm not asking you a question, but you could comment on it. My question really is, if this transition plan is built mostly on the hope of getting private sector investment, how would this energy provision be accessible, inclusive, and affordable?
Um, wow, that's that's a PhD question. It was not in the questions they sent to us. But I'm going to give it my best attempt, you know. So trust Nemo to ambush people on the panel. But Nemo, let me also just pick up on two things. Something you had said earlier, and I think something Lanre has alluded to, and also all of the other panelists have alluded to. When we started the panel, you said that it was just because there was gender balance sort of in the panel. But I think beyond the gender balance, I like the fact that there is community representation here today. Very often when we have this sort of forums, we leave our communities behind. But what this has done is to bring the voices of community into the room to be a part of this conversation. And I think the organizers, Homer, Yar'Adua Center, Ford, deserve an applause for that, because we don't often see that. And this occurred to me even before I knew what Nemo was going to be asking, because when I listened to both of them speak, I thought it was powerful for us to hear what their concerns were, so that when those of us in government, those of us in private sector, or those of us that are in NGOs are thinking about how we address these issues, we actually have the communities at the forefront of our design. So when we talk of design thinking and we're designing interventions, we know that it is the communities that are going to be impacted that should be the ones whose voices are loudest in terms of how the output is. So thank you for that. Now, to then answer your question about whether it's just private sector, I don't think it should be only private sector. In fact, I think, the private sector should just be an enabler like government, and have, or rather not an enabler, but just be a participant or a promoter like government. But we should have a very integrated approach on how we address issues of energy transition in order for it to be just. It is important that for it to be just, we let communities lead. If we're going to have a just transition in terms of this energy transition plan, it is important to let communities lead. And what do I mean by that? Chief here has talked about, what they're experiencing in Ogoni land, and how their lands have been destroyed. There's a lot of work now that is going on around climate smart agriculture, agroecology schools, not just in Nigeria, across sub-Saharan Africa. It is important that we get people who live in this sort of communities to be part of any training and any opportunity that comes to transition from traditional agriculture, as we know, given to these communities. And this is because they are the ones who live in the communities. They are the ones who are going to farm there, right? So there is no going to bring an expert from outside of these communities to come and do the work. The other intervention I'll make about this, Nemo, because sometimes we over-focus on the private sector, is we have to look at other non-aligned sectors. The media has an important part to play in this. How do they break down what this energy transition plan is? how are we teaching them to speak about it intelligently and report about it intelligently as well? Because they are the voices. People are going to listen to them on radio, newspaper, on TV, who are going to amplify what is in the plan, and then also help to hold government accountable. So there should be a media network around developing communications for what energy transition means, so that people that are listening to it on Wari Radio or whatever are able to understand and communicate to people in their indigenous languages about what it is. My last intervention will be, we also need to think about faith-based communities. I'm happy that our traditional institution is well represented here. And Your Royal Majesty, I'm a huge fan, by the way. I think I should say that. But we need to do more with these two other communities, which is the faith-based communities and our traditional institutions, because they have moral authority, sometimes where government does not have. And so if we recognize that people are more inclined to trust their king or to trust their pastor or to trust their imam than they are to trust government, then we must also make sure that they are part of these conversations that we're having about what just transition would mean for their constituencies. My last intervention is to the international community, especially those that give international finance. We are we're at the stage where a lot of the financing that comes from a lot of the big donor organizations are sort of skewed in a way that benefits the West than it benefits us. We want to see interventions on financing that are actually also putting in technical assistance that benefits communities rather than benefits foreign consultants. Because those communities are going to be the ones who can then design an intervention in a way that is sustainable. So that even after every foreign consultant or intervention has left, the people in those communities take the work forward, pass it on to their generation, and then that's where you begin to talk about the resilience, you begin to talk about the adaptation. These things then begin to happen at a very macro level. I have more to say, Nimo, but I will stop there because I think I have answered your questions.
I was just enjoying listening to you and setting some questions for yourself and answering them beyond the one I asked. Thank you so much.